The ground thrummed with the collective thunder of 1,000 engines, a primal beat that vibrated up Leo's worn boots and settled deep in his chest. Dust, a shimmering curtain raised by the endless parade of choppers and chromed cruisers, caught the afternoon sun in a dance of golden motes. He tightened his grip on Finn's shoulder, drawing his son a little closer, as another monstrous machine growled past, its exhaust spitting a dense cloud of rich, burnt fuel. The air was a potent elixir, leather, gasoline, and the faint, tantalizing scent of grilled burgers. Finn, barely 10, yet keenly observant, practically buzzed with excitement. He pointed at every bike, a rapid-fire litany of, "Look, Dad! Is that a V-twin? A Softail?" His clear, high voice nearly pierced the din. Leo just grinned, soaking in the boy's pure, unadulterated joy. This was their yearly pilgrimage to Sturgis, a tradition passed down from Leo's own father. Suddenly, Finn stiffened. His hand shot out, not with the usual eager pointing, but with a rigid, almost desperate urgency. "Dad! Wait! That's it! That's my dad's bike!" He shrieked, a raw, unexpected emotion cracking his voice, slicing through the cacophony. Leo's gaze followed Finn's. A custom Harley Davidson, a true masterpiece, idled slowly past their spot on the main thoroughfare. It was an older model, yet meticulously maintained, gleaming under the sun's embrace. The tank blazed with an impossible inferno orange, melting into obsidian black at the rear fender. Flames, rendered with breathtaking detail, licked along the frame, their tips seeming to shimmer in the heat haze. But it wasn't merely the paint that captivated. The handlebars, custom forged, ascended like skeletal wings, and the exhaust pipes, a distinctive triple-barreled design, emitted a low, guttural growl unlike any other. Perched atop the bike was a mountain of a man, his face framed by a grizzled beard and a faded bandana. Patches on his leather vest proclaimed him a member of the local Hells Angels. Mirrored sunglasses obscured his expression as he idled, momentarily held captive by the pressing crowd. A cold dread began to coil in Leo's stomach. Finn's dad was Liam, his biological father, who had vanished 10 years ago when Finn was an infant. Liam, a free spirit and gifted mechanic, had disappeared without a trace, taking his prized, custom-built Harley with him. The bike, into which he'd poured his very soul, was meant to be the key to finding him, yet it had remained unseen until now. "Finn, are you certain?" Leo whispered, his voice almost lost to the roar. He knelt, aligning his eyes with Finn's, his gaze riveted to the machine. "I'm positive, Dad. The flame paint, the exhaust, and look at the seat. It's got that dragon scale leather my dad special ordered." Finn practically quivered with a blend of awe and bewildered conviction, pointing at the seat. Indeed, an intricately tooled leather pattern, resembling overlapping dragon scales, shimmered faintly in the sunlight. The biker, hearing the boy's excited shouts, finally turned his head, his mirrored lenses reflecting the crowd. An eyebrow twitched, a fleeting hint of confusion crossing his face before it settled back into a stoic mask. "What's the kid rambling about?" he rumbled, his voice gravelly, but not unkind. Leo drew a deep breath. "My son. He claims that's his biological father's bike. His father disappeared with it a decade ago." The biker stared, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Kid, I don't know what you're talking about. This here's my bike. Been mine for 5 years. Bought it legally, fair and square, from a dealership out in Vegas." He patted the fiery orange tank almost affectionately. "She's a beauty, I'll grant you that. But she's mine." "No, it was my dad's," Finn insisted, his small fist clenching. "My mom showed me pictures. He built it himself, the handlebars, see? He called them the Phoenix wings because they looked like they were flying. And the exhaust. He made it so it sounded like a dragon's roar." The biker, known as Grizz, stiffened subtly. The Phoenix wings and dragon's roar were pet names he'd heard from the previous owner, the dealership guy when he had first acquired the bike. He'd never given it much thought, assuming it was just dealer patter. But the boy's unwavering conviction was unnerving. "Tell him, Dad," Finn urged, looking up at Leo with wide, pleading eyes. Leo stepped forward, addressing Grizz directly. "My son's father, Liam Miller, vanished in the summer of 2014. He was last seen leaving his garage, riding a bike precisely like this one. He was a custom builder, and these modifications, they're too specific to be coincidence. The triple-barreled exhaust, the dragon scale seat, the Phoenix wing handlebars. He crafted all of them himself. There isn't another bike like it in the world. Leo's voice was calm, yet an undercurrent of desperation was palpable. Grizz's posture had shifted. The initial amusement had evaporated, replaced by a growing disquiet. He looked at the bike, then at Finn's earnest, unblinking gaze. He'd witnessed enough in his life to discern truth in a child, and this boy felt genuine. Look, I purchased this bike from Iron Horse Cycles. In Vegas, they had it on consignment, supposedly from an estate sale. Grizz said, his voice now lower, a hint of suspicion entering his tone. Had all the paperwork. VIN numbers matched up. Clean title. My father had a unique tattoo on his left forearm, Finn continued, undeterred, a surge of adrenaline making him bolder. It was a black wolf howling at a crescent moon. He said it was for me because I was born under a full moon. Grizz slid off the bike, the heavy thud of his boots on the asphalt drawing the attention of several other patched bikers who had begun to gather, drawn by the unusual confrontation. A wolf howling at a crescent moon, huh? He repeated, almost to himself. He ran a hand through his beard, his brow furrowed in thought. All right, kid, let's talk. This ain't right. If what you're saying is true, then someone's got some explaining to do. He turned to the gathering Hells Angels. Boys, this kid's got a story, and I got a feeling it's a bad one. This bike. This might be more than just a bike. A burly biker named Hammer, a sergeant-at-arms, stepped forward. Grizz, what's going on? Grizz explained the situation, his voice devoid of its earlier lightness. He says this is his dad's bike. Dad disappeared 10 years ago. Custom work matches. And the dealership, they said estate sale. If a man disappeared, then there was no estate sale. There was a stolen bike, and maybe something worse. Hammer's expression hardened. Disappearing act with a valuable custom bike? That smells like foul play, brother. And if someone sold you stolen property, that's a problem for us. If they covered up a disappearance, that's a bigger problem. Another angel, Rattler, stepped up, his eyes keen. An estate sale implies a death. If the man disappeared, no body, no death certificate. How did it get to a dealership? And who signed off on it? The questions hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The rally's festive atmosphere had abruptly soured. The easy camaraderie of bikers sharing their passion was replaced by a grim determination. Grizz looked at Leo, then at Finn, whose face was a mixture of hope and fear. All right, we're going to figure this out. The Hells Angels don't take kindly to people getting taken advantage of, especially not by shady dealerships or worse. And we definitely don't take kindly to a kid having his father's memory disrespected like this. He gestured to Hammer and Rattler. Let's get the VIN. Get the paperwork I got from Iron Horse Cycles. We're going to trace this bike back to the moment it left Finn's father's hands. Every step, every signature. Leo felt a surge of unexpected relief, mixed with a chilling anticipation. After 10 years of silence, 10 years of dead ends and unanswered prayers, a flicker of light had appeared in the most unlikely of places. The roar of the engines around them no longer sounded like celebration. Now, it sounded like a gathering storm. A son's memory. Finn, are you absolutely sure? Leo's voice, usually a booming thunderclap at Sturgis, was a hushed whisper, barely audible above the distant rumble of hundreds of idling engines. His hand clamped tighter on Finn's shoulder, a mix of protectiveness and disbelief warring in his eyes. Finn didn't even glance at his father. His gaze, fiercely unwavering, was fixed on the custom Harley, a beacon in the sea of chrome and leather. Dad, I remember the eagle. Grandpa Liam spent weeks etching those feathers, one by one, into the tank's paint. He used this tiny needle thing. And the seat, it's got his initials, LW, stitched into the leather right here. He pointed to a spot near the backrest. But they're faded now, he showed me. He said it was our secret. Grizz, who had been listening with a stony expression, dismounted slowly. He ran a gloved hand over the precisely indicated spot on the seat, then traced the intricate lines of the eagle on the tank. His eyes, usually crinkling with good humor, were now sharp, scrutinizing the bike as if seeing it for the first time. Kid, I bought this bike fair and square 5 years ago from a dealer down in El Paso. Clean title, everything. What's your old man's name? Liam Wallace, Finn piped up immediately, his voice unwavering. And he called this bike the Thunderbird. Said it was going to carry him on adventures. A ripple went through the small cluster of angels. Liam Wallace, one of them muttered, pulling out a phone. Sounds familiar. Grizz knelt, bringing himself closer to Finn's eye level. His gaze, for all its intensity, held a strange, almost paternal curiosity. So, your dad, Liam Wallace, disappeared 10 years ago with this very bike, the Thunderbird? Finn nodded vigorously. He was supposed to meet us. He never showed up. The police said he probably just left, but he wouldn't have. He promised me we'd go fishing. A flicker of old pain crossed his face, quickly replaced by a renewed determination. He wouldn't just leave the Thunderbird. Leo stepped forward, his face etched with a decade of unanswered questions. We filed a missing person report. They searched for a few months, then classified it as voluntary disappearance. Said he was a drifter, an artist, probably just moved on. But Liam loved that boy. He wouldn't have abandoned him or his bike. Leo's voice cracked with raw emotion. He just vanished. Grizz stood up, his jaw tight. He looked at his fellow angels, then back at the bike. The custom details Finn had described, the eagle, the faded initials, they were all undeniably present. He turned to a burly angel named Hammer. Hammer, get in the horn. Start tracing this VIN. I want to know every hand this bike has passed through since it left the factory. Every single one. And I want to know about a Liam Wallace, missing from... where'd you say, Leo? Flagstaff, Arizona, Leo supplied, finding a sudden, unexpected ally in the imposing biker. Hammer, his face grim, was already pulling out a satellite phone. The easy camaraderie of the rally had evaporated, replaced by a focused, almost predatory energy. Grizz ran a hand over his clean-shaven scalp. A legal purchase? A clean title? But a missing man and a kid who recognizes his lost father's bike. Something's rotten here. He looked at Finn, a strange respect dawning in his eyes. You got a good memory, kid. A damn good memory. The other angels, who had initially been skeptical, now circled the bike, their expressions shifting from amusement to sober contemplation. The details Finn had rattled off were too precise, too intimate, to be mere coincidence. The faint, barely visible LW, etched into the back of the seat, almost worn away by time and use, was undeniable proof. The eagle, a masterpiece of intricate feathering, was unique. No two customs were ever exactly alike. If this bike was stolen, Grizz, one of the angels, a younger man named Twitch, said, his voice low, and your legal purchase was a setup, that's a problem. Grizz nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. More than a problem, Twitch. It's an insult, and if someone made a man disappear over a motorcycle, then sold it through legitimate channels, well, we don't take kindly to that kind of business. His gaze swept over Leo and Finn, a silent promise in his eyes. We'll get to the bottom of this. For Liam Wallace, and for his son. The easy, jovial atmosphere of Sturgis had shattered, replaced by an undercurrent of something much darker, much more serious. The rally, for Grizz and his brothers, had just become a mission. The proof is in the details. The Thunderbird's engine throbbed, a deep purr that contended with the rally's distant roar. Grizz, typically taciturn, stood uncharacteristically quiet, his gaze locked on the faded LW etched into the chrome. Finn, still catching his breath from his outburst, clutched the angel's denim vest, a small hand a white-knuckled anchor. The phalanx of patchbacks had drawn closer, their initial amusement giving way to a heavy, watchful stillness. He called it the Thunderbird, Finn whispered, his voice barely cutting through the distant engine thrum. Said it flew like one. And the eagle. Dad drew it himself, for the tank, before he had it etched. A tentative finger traced the intricate lines, his eyes, so uncannily like Liam's, brimming. Grizz knelt, meeting the boy's gaze. Your dad's name was Liam Wallace. Finn nodded, a tear finally escaping to carve a clean path down his dusty cheek. Yeah, he vanished 10 years ago. Just gone. With the bike. A collective murmur rippled through the angels. A decade. Vanished. The words hung, heavy with unspoken implications. Grizz's jaw clenched. He'd acquired the Thunderbird 5 years prior from a reputable Sturgis dealership, complete with clean title and bill of sale. He prided himself in knowing his bike's lineage. This wasn't merely a stolen vehicle. It was a ghost. The paperwork I received, Grizz began, his voice raspy. Indicated a trade-in. From a private seller, but the dealership managed the transfer. He glanced at Bones, the club's tech guru, whose phone was already out, fingers flying. Dealer records are usually solid, Bones mumbled, not looking up. But a 10-year void. And a disappearance? He shook his head. That's a frozen trail, even for them. Doc, the eldest angel present, his face a roadmap of worn leather, eyes that had witnessed too much, stepped forward. Liam Wallace, you say. What's his story, kid? Finn, emboldened by the sudden gravity etched on their faces, recounted the sparse details he knew. He was a mechanic. Loved bikes more than anything. Mom said he went on a long ride, like always, and simply never returned. The police investigated, but claimed there was nothing to go on. No body, no wreckage, no trace. He looked at Grizz, a desperate plea in his young eyes. They told us he probably just left. Grizz rose, his gaze sweeping over his brothers' faces. They were a family, forged in steel and loyalty. If one of their own had unknowingly come into possession of a bike with such a shadowed past, it became their burden. More than that, a child had just unearthed a fragment of his missing father. A fragment that screamed of foul play. Bones, I want every detail on that dealership. Who traded it in? When? Every scrap of paper. Grizz's voice was low, yet resonated with unshakable resolve. Doc, do you recall anything about a missing biker? Wallace? 10 years back? Around these parts? Doc stroked his grizzled beard. Sturgis sees its share of transients, but a custom Harley like this? Vanished with its owner. That usually leaves a ripple. He paused, brow furrowed in thought. I'll make some calls. Some of the old-timers might recall something. The kind of whispers the cops don't hear. He turned back to the Thunderbird, a gloved hand tracing the eagle etching. This isn't just a bike, Finn. This is evidence. And if what you say is true, your dad didn't just leave. The air around them bristled with new energy. The easy camaraderie of the rally had evaporated, replaced by focused intensity. The Angels, notorious for their fierce loyalty and unique brand of justice, had found a cause. Liam Wallace, a ghost for a decade, was about to be heard, and the Thunderbird, once a symbol of freedom, now bore the heavy weight of a forgotten truth. Finn, sensing the shift, felt a flicker of hope he hadn't known existed. These men, intimidating and rough-hewn, weren't dismissing him. They were listening. They were believing him. He looked at Grizz, whose hardened features held a surprising glint of compassion. You'll help. Grizz met his gaze, his expression unyielding. Kid, we're not just helping. We're finding out what happened to your dad. The proof, as they say, is in the details, and you just gave us the first one. He clapped Finn on the shoulder, a surprisingly gentle gesture. Now, let's get you something to eat, and then we're going to start digging. The Thunderbird's rumble, once a symbol of lost hope, now felt like a promise, sitting fast wheels and shady deals. The Thunderbird's chrome winked under the harsh garage lights, a silent testament to a decade of unanswered questions. Finn traced a finger along the etched eagle, a mirror image of the tattoo on his own forearm. He loved this bike more than anything, he murmured, the words tight with emotion. Grizz, usually a man of few words, looked uncharacteristically somber. I bought it 5 years ago, kid, from a small dealer out in the desert, near Barstow. Heritage Cycles, it was called. He ran a hand over the saddlebag. They said it was an estate sale, clean title. I never had a reason to doubt it. Barstow, Ace repeated, pulling out his phone. That's a long way from Sacramento for an estate sale bike to end up. He started tapping, his brow furrowing as he scrolled. Heritage Cycles. Doesn't ring a bell. And that's saying something. Most dealers in that territory, we know them, or at least know a guy who knows them. The club's president, Wraith, leaned against a workbench, his presence radiating a quiet authority. Liam Wallace didn't just vanish. Not with a bike like this. Someone wanted him gone, and they wanted it to look like he rode off into the sunset. He looked at Grizz. You say Heritage Cycles. What do you remember about the place? The owner? Grizz scratched his beard. It was dusty. Ramshackle, really. More of a chop shop that cleaned up its act, if you ask me. The owner, thin fella, nervous type, said his name was Silas. He paused, a flicker of memory crossing his eyes. Had a bad cough, and he kept glancing at a back room, like he was expecting someone. Ace stopped tapping. Got it. Heritage Cycles in Barstow. Permanently closed according to the state registry. Went out of business 3 years ago. The building was repossessed and then sold at auction to a commercial landscaping company. A collective grunt of dissatisfaction rumbled through the angels. A dead end, or a very cold trail. Silas, you say? Wraith mused. Any other details? A scar? A limp? Anything? Grizz shook his head. Just the cough. And those nervous eyes. Like he was always looking over his shoulder. Finn, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. My mom said Dad used to talk about a guy named Silas, too. Said he owed him a favor from way back. Something about a bad deal that Silas got him out of. His voice was small but firm. He called him Silas the Serpent because he was always slithering out of trouble. A hush fell over the garage. The air thickened with unspoken possibilities. Silas the Serpent, Wraith repeated, the name tasting like ash. That's a lead. A name. Ace. Pull everything you can on a Silas with ties to Barstow and any known motorcycle-related illicit activities. Check old police reports, informant lists, anything. Ace nodded, already tapping furiously. Consider it done. And Grizz, Wraith continued. Think back. Anything else about that dealership? Any other bikes? Customers? Anything at all that seemed out of place? Grizz closed his eyes, concentrating. There was a specific smell, besides the oil and exhaust. Like old leather, but with something else, metallic, and a faint smell of bleach. Like someone had been scrubbing a floor a little too vigorously. He opened his eyes, a strange glint in them, and I remembered the price. It was a steal, even for a bike of this age, almost too good to be true. The angels exchanged glances. A cheap price for a custom bike, a nervous dealer, a mysterious disappearance, and the lingering scent of bleach. The pieces, though scattered, were beginning to form a chilling picture. We start with Silas, Wraith declared, his voice low and resolute, and we find out what he knows about Liam Wallace. No stone unturned, no corner uninvestigated. He looked at Finn, a rare softness in his eyes. We'll get you answers, kid. For your father. Finn simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the Thunderbird. The bike that had once been a symbol of his father's freedom, now held the weight of a decade-long mystery. And perhaps the key to its unraveling. The roar of engines outside signaled the arrival of more angels, drawn by the unusual summons. The club was mobilizing. A silent, powerful machine now focused on a single, long, cold case. The hunt for Silas the Serpent had begun. A mechanic's memory. The desert sun, a relentless hammer by day, had finally softened its blows, bleeding into a bruised purple and orange, as Finn and the angels pulled into Barstow. Heritage Cycles, or what remained of it, was a ghost of a building. Its windows boarded, its sign a rusty skeletal outline against the fading sky. Looks like the snake slithered out, Ace muttered, his voice a low growl. Grizz, his face grim, kicked at a loose piece of asphalt. Place has been closed for years. No surprise there. What about the mechanic? Finn asked, his voice small but determined. The one who worked on the bikes, the one who saw my dad's Thunderbird come in? Silence stretched, broken only by the distant hum of traffic on the interstate. Then Ace, ever the pragmatist, spoke. Good point, kid. Mechanics tend to stick around. Someone would know him. They fanned out, their formidable presence drawing nervous glances from the few late evening stragglers on the street. Grizz, with his intimidating bulk, approached a gas station attendant, his questions direct, his tone leaving no room for evasion. Ace, ever the smooth talker, charmed information out of a waitress at a diner across the street. Finn, surprisingly, found himself drawn to an old man tinkering with a rusted classic car in a dusty garage further down the road. Excuse me, sir, Finn began, his hands jammed into his pockets. The old man, his face a road map of wrinkles, looked up, his eyes a watery blue. What can I do for you, son? I'm looking for a mechanic who used to work at Heritage Cycles, a long time ago. He might remember a custom Thunderbird. The old man stroked his chin, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. Heritage Cycles, huh? Silas's place. Yeah, I remember it. Shady business, that. The mechanic. Gus, I think his name was. Good wrench, but a quiet sort. Kept to himself. Do you know where I can find him? Finn pressed. a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Last I heard, he moved down to Needles, got himself a small shop there, near the old Route 66 diner. Fixed up classic cars, mostly. Finn relayed the information to Grizz and Ace, a new urgency in his step. Needles was a short ride, and in the hope of finding someone who had actually seen Liam's bike, who might have touched it, felt like a lifeline. The next morning, the desert air still crisp from the night, they rolled into Needles. Gus's shop was exactly as described, a small, unassuming building nestled beside a faded diner, the scent of oil and old leather hanging heavy in the air. Inside, a man in grease-stained overalls, his hair thin and gray, was hunched over a sputtering engine. "Gus!" Grizz's voice boomed, making the mechanic jump. Gus straightened slowly, his eyes widening as he took in the formidable sight of the angels. "Can I help you?" he stammered, his gaze darting nervously between them. "We're looking for information about heritage cycles," Ace said, his tone softer, more reassuring. "Specifically about a custom Triumph Thunderbird that came through there about 10 years ago." Gus's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "That place, it's been closed for a long time." "We know," Finn said, stepping forward. "My name's Finn. That was my dad's bike. Liam Wallace." The name seemed to hit Gus like a physical blow. He swayed slightly, his face paling. "Liam Wallace," he whispered, a distant memory stirring. "The Thunderbird. I remember it. Distinctive bike, that one. Custom paint? Engine work?" "What do you remember about it?" Grizz urged, his voice tight with anticipation. Gus wiped his hands on a rag, his gaze unfocused, as he cast his mind back. "It came in not long after Liam disappeared. Silas brought it in, said he bought it off him. Cash deal, no paperwork, which was typical for Silas. But something felt off. Off? I mean, how?" Ace pressed. "The bike, it was clean. Too clean. Like it hadn't been ridden hard. And Liam, he loved that bike. He wouldn't have just sold it, not like that. And he wouldn't have let it go so clean. He rode hard. Always did." Gus paused, rubbing his temples. "Silas told me to give it a full service, clean it up good. Said he had a buyer coming from out of state." "Did you do any work on the engine?" Finn asked, remembering his father's meticulous care of the bike. Gus nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did. A complete tune-up, but there was something else. Under the seat, tucked into the frame, I found a small compartment, custom built. Silas hadn't noticed it. The air in the garage crackled with sudden tension. "What was in it?" Grizz demanded, his voice barely a whisper. "Nothing," Gus replied, shaking his head. "It was empty, but it looked like something had been ripped out. A small GPS tracker, maybe. Or a recording device. Something small, electronic." Finn felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. A hidden compartment, ripped clean. It sounded like someone had been searching for something Liam had hidden. "And the sale of the bike," Ace prompted. "Silas sold it to a dealership in Barstow, eventually. Heritage Cycles." Gus scoffed. "Silas never sold it to Heritage Cycles. He was Heritage Cycles. He just operated under different names, different shell companies. He'd buy bikes, clean titles, then sell them to himself through his own dealerships. It was a way to launder money, dodge taxes, and make bikes with questionable origins look legitimate." The pieces were beginning to click into place, forming a dark, unsettling picture. Liam's bike, sold under suspicious circumstances, a hidden compartment, and Silas's shady dealings. It wasn't a simple disappearance. It was a calculated act, and Silas was at the heart of it. "Did you ever see Liam again?" Finn asked, his voice barely audible. Gus shook his head slowly, his gaze heavy with regret. "No, son, and never saw him after that. But when I saw that bike, and when Silas brought it in, I had a bad feeling. A really bad feeling." He looked at Finn, his eyes filled with a new kind of understanding. "Silas, he was a snake, through and through, and he didn't just deal in bikes, he dealt in favors and trouble. The van's shadow?" The scent of stale beer and exhaust fumes still clung to Finn's clothes as they left Gus's garage, but a new, sharper smell of purpose filled the air around the angels. Gus's words, a jigsaw piece clicking firmly into place, had sharpened their resolve. Silas wasn't just a shady dealer. He was now the prime suspect in Liam's disappearance. Empty compartment, Hammer said, his voice a low growl, as they rumbled back towards the clubhouse. Someone didn't want whatever was in there found, and he brought the bike in clean after Liam went missing. It stinks to high heaven. Finn rode silently behind Axel, the wind whipping his hair, but his mind raced. An empty compartment. What could have been so important that someone would risk everything to remove it? And why would Silas be involved? He remembered the man from the rally. Slick, a little too smooth, a predatory glint in his eyes. Back at the clubhouse, the atmosphere was different. The jovial camaraderie had been replaced by a focused tension. The angels moved with a quiet intensity, their usual booming laughter replaced by terse commands. Axel pulled out a worn topographical map of the surrounding counties, spreading it across the scarred wooden table. Gus mentioned Silas used a shell company, Velocity Ventures, to legitimize bikes, Axel said, tracing a finger across the map. He had a storage unit out towards the old industrial park, but that was years ago. Might be worth checking, even if it's a long shot. Hammer nodded. He's got to have a new setup. These guys don't just vanish into thin air. He's still moving product. What about his current business? Finn asked, his voice surprisingly steady. Silas's Customs. Where's that located? Axel looked at him, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Good question, kid. It's on the other side of town, near the old shipping yards. Not exactly a high-traffic area, which tells you something. A place where discreet business can be done, Reaper added, his voice gravelly. They formulated a plan. A small reconnaissance team, led by Axel, would head to Silas's Customs. Not to confront, not yet, but to observe. Finn would stay at the clubhouse with a few of the older angels, monitoring their communications. It felt both frustrating and necessary. He wanted to be in the thick of it, but understood the caution. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, Axel, Hammer, and Reaper mounted their bikes. Finn watched them disappear down the road, the roar of their engines fading into the evening hum. He sat by the radio, the static a constant whisper, his nerves a tight knot in his stomach. The clubhouse, usually a vibrant hub, felt strangely quiet without the full chapter. The weight of his father's disappearance pressed down on him, heavier than ever. An hour later, Axel's voice crackled through the comms. We're here. Looks quiet from the front. Small, unassuming garage, but there's a back alley entrance. Looks like a loading dock. Any activity? Finn asked, leaning closer to the speaker. Nothing obvious, but there's a beat-up white cargo van parked out back. Covered in mud, no company markings. Looks like it's seen some miles and some rough roads. A cold dread snaked its way through Finn. A van. Why a van? It didn't fit with the sleek, high-end image Silas cultivated. Minutes later, Hammer chimed in. Axel, you see this? There's a faint outline on the side of that van. Like something was peeled off. A logo, maybe? I'm trying to get a better look. Axel replied. Hold on. A rustling sound. Then Axel's voice, sharper now. Damn, it's faint, but I think I can make out a partially peeled sticker. Looks like a stylized H and C, Heritage Cycles. The words hit Finn like a physical blow. Heritage Cycles. Gus's old shop. The very place where Liam's custom Thunderbird had been serviced. Where Silas had supposedly brought it in. The van, dirty and unmarked, now carried a ghostly echo of his father's last known movements. The tension in the room thickened. Palpable. Heritage Cycles? Finn whispered into the mic, his voice barely audible. That's what it looks like, kid, Axel confirmed, his tone grim. This isn't just about Silas fencing hot bikes. This van, it suggests he was directly involved in whatever went down at Heritage. And if he was driving a van from there, after Liam went missing, the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. The van wasn't just a shadow. It was a ghost, a silent witness to a decade-old mystery. Now parked in plain sight, a stark and chilling clue. The net around Silas was tightening, each new discovery pulling them closer to the truth and to the dangerous man who held it. The dusty warehouse. The air inside Silas's Customs hummed with a low, almost predatory silence. Axel's voice, usually a gravelly roar, was a tight whisper as he relayed their findings to Gus over the comms. The van's gone, boss. Cleaned out. Not a trace of that mud or the logo. Gus cursed, a low rumble that vibrated through Finn, even on the other end of the line. Damn it! He's smarter than we thought. Knew we were coming. Maybe not knew, Axel countered, his tone thoughtful. More like expected. Guy running that kind of operation doesn't leave loose ends. He moves fast. Finn, perched on the edge of a worn workbench, felt a chill despite the stifling heat of the garage. Silas was a ghost, always a step ahead. He envisioned the man, a shadowy figure, always just out of reach, leaving only faint trails. "What's next, Gus?" Axel asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. Gus paused, and Finn could almost hear the gears turning in the big man's head. "All right, Axel, get your team back here. If Silas is cleaning house, he's got to be moving it somewhere. Think about it. Where would a guy like that stash something valuable? Something he's been hiding for a decade?" The answer, when it came, was almost a collective thought among the angels. A warehouse, an abandoned one, likely, somewhere forgotten, out of the way. "We need to dig into Velocity Ventures properties," Gus declared. "See what shell companies they've got tied to old industrial sites, defunct businesses. Anything that screams forgotten." The search began, a meticulous dive into digital records and county property databases. Hours blurred into a relentless pursuit. Finn watched, mesmerized, as the angels, usually a force of raw muscle and instinct, transformed into a formidable team of digital sleuths. Gus, surprisingly adept at navigating online registries, narrowed down a list of 10 potential locations. "This one," Gus said, pointing a thick finger at a satellite image on a laptop screen. "Old shipping facility, just outside the city limits. Been derelict for 20 years. Velocity Ventures acquired it 6 months ago through a subsidiary. No permits pulled, no work started, just sitting there." The image showed a sprawling, dilapidated complex, its corrugated metal roof patched with rust, windows boarded up, a skeletal chimney reaching toward the sky, a perfect hideaway. "Let's roll," Axel said, his eyes gleaming with renewed purpose. The ride out to the warehouse was a tense affair. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the bruised purples and fiery oranges, but the beauty was lost on Finn. His stomach churned with a mixture of dread and anticipation. This felt different, more immediate. They approached the warehouse complex from a dirt road, the motorcycle's engines rumbling low like distant thunder. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. The perimeter fence was a tangle of rusted wire, easily breached. "All right, spread out," Gus commanded, his voice barely audible above the chirping crickets. "Axel, you and your crew check the main building. Dakota, you take the side structures. Finn, you stay with me. Stay low. Stay quiet." The vast complex was a labyrinth of shadows. Weeds grew waist-high through cracked asphalt. Broken glass glittered under the sparse moonlight. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the crunch of their boots and the distant hoot of an owl. Gus and Finn moved towards a smaller secondary building, its heavy metal door slightly ajar. A faint, metallic smell hung in the air, tinged with something sweet and sickly, like old oil and something else, something familiar but unidentifiable. Gus pushed the door open further, revealing an interior shrouded in gloom. A single beam of moonlight cut through a broken window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the stale air. The floor was concrete, littered with rusted tools and discarded crates. "Stay here," Gus whispered, his hand on Finn's shoulder. A silent command. He drew a small flashlight, its beam a concentrated spear in the darkness. Finn watched, his heart hammering against his ribs, as Gus swept the light across the interior. The beam landed on a stack of neatly organized boxes in a far corner, covered with tarp. Then it found something else. A large, dark shape draped with another heavier tarp, closer to them. It had the unmistakable outline of a vehicle. Gus moved closer, his movement slow and deliberate. He pulled back the tarp with a swift, decisive motion. The flashlight beam revealed a cargo van, mud-splattered. And on its side, faint but unmistakable, was the faded logo, Heritage Cycles. A gasp escaped Finn's lips, a tiny sound swallowed by the cavernous space. He felt a surge of recognition, a sickening lurch in his gut. This was it. The missing piece. The connection to his father. He took a tentative step forward, his eyes fixed on the van, a cold dread creeping into his bones. What else would they find inside? Beneath the floorboards, Gus's hand, a silent anchor, settled on Finn's shoulder, bracing him against the sudden icy dread emanating from the Old van. The Heritage Cycles logo, a faded specter caked in the same telltale mud as the warehouse exterior, was more than just a name. It was a haunting. Gus squeezed. All right, Finn. Let's see what other mementos Silas left us. The air inside the cavernous building hung heavy with dust, stale oil, and a metallic tang, almost coppery. Weak light filtered through grimy windows, stretching shadows long and distorted across the floor. Aside from the van, the only other occupants were collapsed crates and a rusted forklift, its grease-caked tines pointing haphazardly from a corner. Gus's phone flashlight pierced the gloom as Finn's gaze darted from the van to the room's forgotten corners, searching for an unknown answer. Gus circled the cargo van, his eyes sharp, tracing the faint impression of a forced lock, with a small dent near the rear door. Silas isn't exactly a tidy criminal, he murmured, more to himself. He's fast, but he leaves a trail. The back door is groaned open on stiff hinges, revealing an interior stripped bare, save for a fine layer of gray dust. Cleaned out, just like the other one, Gus noted. Whatever he's moving, it's valuable enough to risk all this. Finn, however, was fixated on something else. Near the van's front, where an oil slick stained the concrete, he noticed a faint, irregular line in the dust, charting a path away from the vehicle toward a section of the wall. Not a tire mark nor a footprint. It looked like something heavy had been dragged. Gus, he said, his voice tight. Look here. Gus knelt, his flashlight beam following Finn's pointing finger. The mark was subtle, nearly swallowed by the dimness, but unmistakable once seen. It led to a patch of concrete that looked subtly different. A lighter shade, its cracks not quite aligning with the surrounding floor. Good eye, kid, Gus said, a new intensity in his low voice. Looks like a shoddy patching job. He pulled a small crowbar from his belt, prodding at the edges of the lighter concrete. With a grunt, a 3x4-foot section gave way with a grating scrape, revealing a dark cavity. A gust of colder, mustier air wafted up. Finn peered over Gus's shoulder, his heart thrumming. The hole, only 3 feet deep, was wide enough for a person to crouch inside. Illuminated by Gus's powerful beam, a collection of objects sent a fresh wave of shock through Finn. Several sturdy metal-bound chests, clearly designed for secure transport, lay scratched and worn. But it wasn't the chests that captivated Finn. Nestled amongst them, carefully wrapped in thick canvas, was a gleaming chrome exhaust pipe. Its distinctive, almost serpentine curve was instantly familiar. That's Dad's, Finn whispered, his voice catching. He didn't need to see the rest of the bike. That pipe, with its unique hand-welded details, was his father's. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His father's bike hadn't just been stolen. It had been meticulously stripped and hidden. Gus, recognizing the immediate spark in Finn's eyes, kept his expression neutral, though his grip on the crowbar tightened. He knew what this meant. It wasn't just evidence of a crime. It was evidence of a murder. Reaching into the pit, he carefully shifted a canvas-wrapped item. Beneath it, a flash of red and gold caught the light, the unmistakable intricate painting on his father's custom fuel tank, still bearing the faint imprint of a hand-painted phoenix. A tremor ran through Finn, a mix of grief and a strange, potent anger. The pipe, the tank, it was all here. His father wasn't just gone. He had been systematically erased, piece by piece. His eyes scanned the other items. Another canvas bundle revealed a set of custom handlebars, their grips worn smooth from years of use. Beside them, tucked almost carelessly, was a small tarnished silver locket. What's this? Finn asked, his voice barely audible. Gus picked it up, brushing off the dust. It was simple, with a faded engraving. To my brave boy. He opened it. Inside, 2 yellowed miniature photographs depicted a younger, smiling woman and a tiny baby. Finn instantly recognized his mother in his own infant face. An overwhelming wave of raw emotion washed over Finn. This wasn't just his father's motorcycle. It was his father's life, his memories, painstakingly hidden away as if contraband. The locket, a deeply personal memento, confirmed the horrific truth. Silas wasn't just involved in a criminal enterprise. He was directly responsible for the systematic disappearance of Finn's father and the deliberate concealment of everything he held dear. The dread intensified, replaced now by a burning desire for answers, for justice. Gus looked at Finn, his eyes grim. This confirms it, Finn. Silas knows exactly what happened. He's been holding on to this for a long time. The implications were stark. Silas was not just a dealer. but an accomplice, perhaps even the architect, of a decade-old crime. The silence in the warehouse felt heavy, charged with the weight of Finn's father's forgotten past, finally rising to the surface. Justice, from Art Gus's voice, raw with emotion, cut through the warehouse's dusty hush. "This is it, kid. Exactly what we needed." He held the locket, silver gleaming under the lone bare bulb. Mark's younger, happier face, cradling an infant Finn, smiled from one side. The other held Sarah, Finn's mother, her smile a faint echo in the muted light. Gus extended it to Finn, whose fingers trembled, closing around the cold metal. Its weight felt immense, a decade of absence compressed into a small engraved oval. "You kept it?" Finn whispered, his voice thick. "Silas kept it. All this time." The implication hung like a suffocating drape. Silas hadn't merely stolen the bike. He'd systematically tried to erase Mark. Memory by memory. The simmering grief in Finn finally erupted into rage. This wasn't a child's fit, but a steely resolve, mirroring the adult world now claiming him. Gus clapped a hand on Finn's shoulder, a gesture of both solace and shared purpose. "He won't escape this, Finn. Not anymore." He turned to the other angels, his gaze sweeping their grim visages. "Scout, Bones, head back to the clubhouse. Spread the word. Silas is fair game. I want every single member searching. If he so much as twitches to run, I want to know. Shadow, Tank, secure this location. No one in or out until the cops arrive. I'm calling Chief Miller myself." The angels moved with practiced precision, their usual boisterous energy replaced by a focused intensity. The air crackled, the shift from investigation to direct action palpable. Finn watched them, a strange sense of belonging settling over him. He was no longer just the kid who spotted a bike. He was integral to their quest for justice. Gus pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over a contact. He met Finn's gaze. "Ready for this, kid?" Finn, clutching the locket, nodded. "More than ready." The call to Chief Miller was concise, Gus's tone firm and unyielding. "Chief, it's Gus. We've located Mark Jensen's bike parts, and we've uncovered direct evidence linking Silas to his disappearance. We're at his old warehouse on Elm Street beyond the docks. We need you here now. And I'd advise you bring a full team. This is no longer just a missing person." While they waited, Gus knelt beside Finn, indicating a tiny, almost imperceptible scuff mark on one of the hidden engine casings. "See that? Your dad always did his own work. That's his signature, Finn. A small imperfection he left on every engine he built or rebuilt. He called it his fingerprint." Finn traced the mark, a faint smile touching his lips. It was a minute detail, yet it spoke volumes, a testament to his father's meticulous nature and his enduring presence within these objects. A piece of him Silas hadn't been able to strip away. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily. Blue and red lights sliced through the grimy windows, painting the warehouse interior in fleeting stark hues. Chief Miller, flanked by officers, strode in, his eyes canvassing the scene. He stopped short at the sight of the dismantled motorcycle, then the locket in Finn's hand. His usual stoicism fractured. "Gus, what have you uncovered?" Miller's voice was hushed, laced with a gravity absent from their previous encounters. Gus gestured to the heap of parts. "Mark's bike, every last piece, and this." He indicated the locket, hidden in a compartment of the custom fuel tank, along with evidence that Silas deliberately stripped and concealed everything. Miller knelt, examining the locket. He recognized the faces. My God. Silas. He was involved from the outset. He rose, his gaze hardening. "This changes everything. This isn't a cold case anymore. This is a deliberate, calculated act. And the concealment of evidence for a decade." He looked at Finn, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "Finn, I promise you, we will secure justice for your father." The warehouse swiftly filled with forensic technicians, their gloved hands meticulously documenting every fragment of the puzzle. The air hummed with their hushed conversations and the rhythmic click of cameras. Finn watched, a strange confluence of relief and renewed sorrow washing over him. The truth was finally exposed, but it brought with it the bitter confirmation of his worst fears. His father hadn't simply vanished. He had been taken. As the technicians worked, Gus drew Finn aside. "The angels are on it. Silas won't be able to breathe without us knowing. We'll find him, Finn, and then we'll ensure he answers for his actions." His eyes, usually crinkling with good humor, were sharp, unwavering. The promise in them was absolute. Finn looked at the locket again, the faces within smiling back at him. He knew now. He knew what had befallen his father. And with the angels by his side, he knew justice was no longer a distant dream, but an imminent reality. The decade of wondering was over. The hunt for Silas had officially begun. A new ride, a shared memory. The morning air, typically a soothing caress, now bristled with an unspoken tension as Finn and Gus stood before the resurrected phoenix. Chrome gleamed under the burgeoning sun, a testament to the angels' tireless efforts. Mark's old bike, once a jumble of twisted metal, now hummed with a renewed vigor, its customized engine pulsing a familiar cadence. Finn reached out, his fingers tracing the distinctive phoenix emblem on the tank, a wave of bittersweet reminiscence washing over him. "She's primed, kid." Gus's voice, rough yet gentle, drew Finn from his contemplation. He handed Finn a polished leather jacket, a smaller replica of Mark's, subtly embroidered with a phoenix on the back. "A little memento, and for you, when you ride with us." Finn shrugged on the jacket. Its weight felt substantial, the supple leather a whisper against his skin, carrying faint traces of oil and aged hide, almost an echo of his father. A surge of pride swelled within him, a sense of belonging he hadn't anticipated. "Thank you, Gus. She's faultless." Gus nodded, his gaze momentarily distant. "Your old man would beam with pride. He always envisioned you experiencing the open road." He then addressed the other angels, who had gathered, their expressions a blend of satisfaction and grim resolve. "All right, listen up. Silas is on the run, but he won't evade us for long. Chief Miller has every major highway checkpoint alerted. We're fanning out. Some of us will canvass the usual haunts, the back road dives, the chop shops. Others will lean on his known associates." He met Finn's gaze. "You're with me, kid. We're heading to the docks." Silas always had an affinity for the water, a route to vanishing. Finn's stomach tightened with anticipation. The docks. A realm of shadows and secrets, where illicit cargo moved under the cloak of darkness. It felt appropriate, a place where a man like Silas might melt away or be cornered. The Phoenix's engine roared, a powerful beat beneath Finn as he settled onto the passenger seat behind Gus. The wind whipped through his hair, a heady mix of exhaust fumes and distant sea salt filling his senses. He clutched the locket in his pocket, its metallic coolness a steady anchor to his purpose. This was no mere joyride. It was an imperative. As they navigated the city's industrial fringes, the scenery gradually shifted. Gritty warehouses with peeling paint gave way to towering cranes and the vast expanse of the harbor. The air grew heavy with brine and the metallic tang of shipping containers. Gus brought the Phoenix to a halt near a deserted pier, its wooden planks groaning under the weight of decades. "Silas has deep roots here," Gus explained, his voice hushed. "Always dabbled in the gray market. Contraband, stolen goods. He'd facilitate anything for the right price." They dismounted, the dock's silence broken only by the distant squawk of gulls and the rhythmic clanging of ropes against masts. The air hung thick with expectation, every shadow a potential hideaway. Finn's eyes meticulously scanned the desolate landscape. The stacked containers, the dormant ships listing gently in the murky water. Suddenly, a flicker of motion snagged his attention. A small, hunched figure emerged from behind a stack of rusted barrels, nervously glancing around. Finn nudged Gus. "Look, over there!" Gus followed Finn's gaze, his hand instinctively gravitating to the hilt of the knife tucked into his boot. The figure was a young man, barely older than Finn, his face gaunt and etched with worry. He attempted nonchalance, but his hurried movements and darting eyes betrayed his unease. "That's Manny," Gus murmured, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Silas's errand boy. He holds answers." They moved stealthily, using the containers as cover, approaching Manny from behind. The young man fumbled with a small, weathered satchel, his back to them. "Manny." Gus's voice, though quiet, sliced through the silence like a scalpel. Manny jumped, spinning around, his eyes wide with terror at the sight of Gus and Finn. His hand instinctively reached for his pocket, but Gus's imposing presence froze him. "Easy, kid," Gus said, his tone firm. "We just want to talk. About Silas." Manny's eyes darted between Gus and Finn, his fear palpable. I don't know anything, he stammered, his voice cracking. Finn stepped forward, pulling the locket from his pocket. My father, Mark. Silas did this to him. He held up the locket, the faded photos of his family, a silent testament to their suffering. You worked for him. You must know something. Manny's gaze fell on the locket, and a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps pity, crossed his face. He swallowed hard. Silas. He was always meticulous, never left a trace. But you witnessed things, didn't you? Finn pressed, his voice unwavering. You overheard things. You know his destination, or who he's meeting. Manny hesitated, his eyes flicking towards a large, dilapidated fishing trawler docked at the furthest end of the pier, its paint peeling, its windows boarded up. He had a boat, an escape route, always spoke of disappearing to some remote island. Gus followed Manny's gaze. The trawler, christened the Siren's Call, looked as if it hadn't sailed in years, yet a faint shimmer of recent activity clung to its rusted hull. That old tub. Where would he procure the fuel, the provisions? Manny wrung his hands. He had a cache, hidden in the old lighthouse keeper's shed. Said he'd be ready to cast off by nightfall, tonight. A jolt of adrenaline coursed through Finn. Tonight, the final confrontation. He looked at Gus, who met his gaze, a grim determination hardening his features. All right, Manny, Gus said, his voice softening now. You've been helpful. Now go. Vanish. We don't want you caught in the crossfire. Manny, visibly relieved, nodded vigorously and scurried away, melting back into the shadows of the containers. Gus turned to Finn, his expression serious. The lighthouse keeper's shed. That's our next objective. And then we corner Silas. Finn felt a cold resolve settle over him. The air was thick with the promise of justice, and he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that his father's decade-long disappearance was finally about to be resolved.